Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, which this morning is on civil service pensions and Capita, understanding the issues and what help is available. That's going to be delivered by David Luxton from the Civil Service Pensioners Alliance. Just before I hand over to David, for those of you who aren't aware of the charity, I just wanted to briefly explain the charity and what we do. We're the Civil Service we're the Charity for Civil Servants. We used to be the Civil Service Benevolent Fund. We've been around for about 140 years this year. We're coming up to that anniversary. And our vision is to be a supportive community in which everyone has the chance to live their life to the full. We offer financial assistance, so we can accept applications for financial assistance, short term, not necessarily ongoing, and a range of services. So we also have a wellbeing service where you can have a wellbeing conversation with a member of the team and they can signpost you to further advice and support. You can also access lots of information and tools through our website, for instance, the Thrive app and the GriefWorks app. We also have a money advice service. So if anybody's struggling with debt or just needs some advice with budgeting and managing money, we do have a money advice service with qualified money advisors who can help talk you through your situation and work out the best solutions. In terms of who we can help any civil servants, whether serving, former or retired, and their dependents. So, and by dependents, we mean anybody who's financially dependent on you. There's no need to donate to the charity in order to receive our help. We're not a membership organisation. It's just being a civil servant that makes you eligible for our help. So just before we start, if you have got any questions, if you can use the Q&A function on Teams to ask any questions, and then we will try to cover as many as possible at the end. If we're not able to answer all the questions, what we would do is collate them, and we will attach a PDF document to the recording of this webinar, which will be available on our website afterwards. And if you'd rather not show your name, you can anonymise your questions, so you can ask questions anonymously. So I will now hand over to David, who's going to be talking to you about civil service pensions and Capita. Thanks, David.
Good morning. I'm David Luxton, Pensions Manager at the Civil Service Pensioners Alliance. Thanks for joining our webinar in partnership with the Charity for Civil Servants. Now, you'll be well aware that over the past 4 months, there has been a real crisis in the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. At CSPA, we've been helping many members whose retirement plans have been severely disrupted by the failings of the administration of the scheme, following the transition to Capita from the 1st of December 2025. Tens of thousands of civil servants have had enormous stress, frustration, financial hardship due to the long delays in paying their lump sum and pensions that are due to them, but it's been made a lot worse by the totally inadequate communications from Capita, the system failures in the rollout of the pension portal, and the unacceptable, very unacceptable long delays in the telephone waiting times. The failures in administration have also impacted on the dependents of recently deceased members and their families, and that's been very heartbreaking to hear a lot of those stories, and those active scheme members who are going through divorce proceedings but unable to get the necessary pension information required by the courts because of the backlogs that are built up. Last week, in addition to all of this, it was revealed that there was a data breach on the pension portal on the 30th of March involving 138 members who either received annual benefit statements belonging to other members or had their data seen by other members. Clearly, that is unacceptable. It's a very limited data breach, but nevertheless, it does not give confidence in the administration of the scheme. So if we can move on now to what we're going to cover on this webinar. Today's webinar will focus on the background of the unacceptable levels of delay provided by the pension scheme, to give an overview on the numbers of people affected by the delays, so you get an understanding of how many people are in a similar position, share with you some of the lived experiences of some of the scheme members who CSPA has been helping over the past few months, and set out the current timescales agreed between Capita and the Cabinet Office for resolving the outstanding backlog of cases and returning to normal performance levels, and how you can pursue a formal complaint and any subsequent claim for compensation and also, more importantly, where you can get help in escalating your case. If we just briefly look at the background to all of this, and I'll do this very quickly, but in November 2023, the Cabinet Office announced that it awarded the contract for running the Civil Service Pension Scheme to Capita for its 1.7 million members, with a 2-year transition period ending on the 1st of December 2025. In October 2025, so a few months before the transition handover, the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee raised concerns about the transition following their inquiry in response to a national audit investigation during the summer. And in the course of that NAO investigation, it became apparent that Capita had already had some financial penalties imposed on them for meeting some key milestones in the transition. So this was starting to raise alarm bells about whether this was going to be the smooth handover that the Cabinet Office had promised would be the case. It was apparent in October that a huge backlog of cases was building up with MyCSP, the previous provider, which was likely to worsen with an ongoing industrial dispute with MyCSP that went on in October, November in the run-up to the transition. Despite these serious concerns and questions raised by the Public Accounts Committee in the summer, the transition nevertheless went ahead on the 1st of December 2025. It soon emerged that there was a backlog of 86,000 pension cases, which had grown to 120,000 cases by the end of January. And it was revealed that within that, there was 15,000 unopened emails waiting to be read and processed prior to the transfer. Now, of course, those emails would have had some routine changes of address or other administrative changes, but some of those would be notifying of bereavements or urgent hardship issues relating to pensions, but they hadn't been read. It was later confirmed that Capita were told by the Cabinet Office last July, a few months before the transition, to prepare for backlog volumes of up to 100,000 cases. So they should have been aware that this was going to be a real problem, and that should have been factored in terms of the transition time. Moving on to the member experiences that we've had, and a lot of you will have experienced this, excessive long telephone wait times trying to get through to the help desk at Capita, in excess of 4 hours in many cases. That's made worse by the fact that we discovered from some members they've been getting telephone bills of £50 or more for waiting on the telephone, only to be told their case has been escalated, a meaningless phrase when it turns out that nothing much was being done. The problems there's been logging onto the new pension portal from day one, because the pension portal was meant to be the alternative to people ringing up constantly to get information. Those that did manage to log on discovered there was missing information and messages via the portal were not being answered. So leaving members with no alternative than to hold on the telephone queue to resolve their urgent problems. Subsequently, it was revealed, and we didn't know this at the time, that there were 122,000 scheme members who were locked out of the portal and remained locked out of the portal for some months. And these were people who had different periods of mixed service. So it was seen that because they were more complicated with their pension benefits, that they were not allowed to access the portal. But none of that information was made available, which could have managed expectations. And that's a huge failure in the communications. And so there's no means to contact Capita other than by telephone, as there's no email address available. So the lack of responses to messages and the complaints through the portal, and often conflicting responses from Capita helpline staff, made the situation very frustrating. And within that, we've had huge delays in the payment of lump sums that were due on retirement, serious delays in death in service payments to families, and bereavement payments to beneficiaries for civil servants who died in retirement. Members were constantly told your case has been escalated, but no information, no timescale, no indication of when it was likely to be resolved. And this Easter weekend, the portal was offline while the data breach I referred to earlier was being rectified. So we're also aware now from a story in The Guardian on Saturday of the hardship facing one particular civil service pensioner who had a pension reduced from £19,700 a year to £12,000 because of an overpayment caused by my CSP over 5 years ago, and then receiving a letter from Capita telling her that she needs to repay the debt, and if she pays it over time, it won't be finished until she's 93. She's 66 at the moment. I had another case yesterday of someone who has been on a repayment plan for a previous overpayment, and then received a letter from Capita telling her that she owed £4,000, even though she'd paid off half of that already with her monthly payments, and Capita were demanding immediate payment of a lump sum that she didn't owe. And that's one that we're taking forward. So CSPA can assist members who are facing recovery demands following an overpayment, but that's just another problem on top of the current position. Now, what you would be more interested in at the moment is what's happening to the retirement requests and quotations. And what we have now in the current position for the pre-December retirements, in other words, people who had a retirement date planned before the switchover, not that their retirement date was before then, but they had it, the request and everything should have been done by then. Of those, there's 8,500 members who'd retired after October 2025, but were left for months with no income prior to the lump sum payments eventually being paid at the end of January. And the lump sum payments were completed by the end of February, but almost all of those individuals have not received their pension arrears. And we're now told that pension arrears will be paid until the end of April. Now, back at the end of January, they were told it'd be 8 weeks from there, which indicated early April. But we now understand that they should be completed by the end of April. So that's all of those who, and that's a serious failure, because here's people who had planned to retire in November or December, having to wait months and months before they receive any payments, and left to borrow from friends because they've got no earnings income and no pension. And that's a scandalous waste and should never have happened. Looking at those who've got retirement dates after the 1st of December, we now know that there's 21,000 individuals who are still waiting for full pension quotations or pension finalisation statements, or waiting for their pensions on their planned date. We are now told that these cases should all be cleared by the end of June. But that phase, it might give some optimistic hope that this will be done by the end of June, but behind that lays a huge problem, because so many people had planned to retire at the end of March or the end of April, and they're now finding that they're not going to get their pension then. They're left in a dilemma as to what can they do. That they've given their notice, they've planned their retirement, they've made financial commitments on the basis that they were expecting to get lump sums and their pension, and that hasn't materialised. So that is a huge failing. We understand of those 21,000 individuals, 2,000 were still pre-December retirement dates, but 19,000 of those quotations and finalisation statements are for those with retirement dates after December. And then we got a revelation from Angela McDonald from HMRC, who's the head of the recovery team that was brought in to try and resolve this mess. She confirmed just last week that only very limited work is being done on quotes submitted to Capita since the 1st of December 2025. Now, that is a huge revelation, because what that means is that people who had been expecting to go at the end of March or the end of April, now realising that they're not likely to get anything until the end of June. For deferred members, those who'd left the civil service without taking their accrued pension, the backlog we now understand is 1,246 deferred members who will not be clear, and they'll not have theirs cleared until the end of June. Most of those members have received their lump sums, we understand, but 371 are still waiting for their lump sums, according to the Cabinet Office. So these are deferred members who were expected to retire sometime since last November. For cases of bereavements or in retirement or deferment, there are 6,500 cases that are in that backlog. But behind each one of those cases, it's a huge personal hardship story. And we've been dealing with a lot of those in the CSPA office. Just moving on now to something that we pressed for, which was to ensure that there were interest payments for these late delays. It was confirmed in February, after a lot of pressure from CSPA and from the civil service unions, that interest payments will be added to the pension arrears that when they're eventually paid for any delay of 1 month or more from the agreed retirement date. And the rate of interest will be the Bank of England bank rate, which is currently 3.75% plus 1%. For delayed widow or widowers pensions, the interest will be paid for delays of over 4 months, backdated to 3 months before the notified date of death, after the notified date of death. And the reason for that is that because I questioned why there was a difference between the 1 month and 3 months for widows and widowers, because of the normal expectation of how long it would take to process an application for bereavement. But interest will be paid in those cases. Now, moving on to the next slide, this is how can you escalate an issue? In the immediate priority is to get the delayed pension paid and then seek redress for the delays. CSPA has been helping many members who've been impacted by the delays. We are triaging cases that we receive on a weekly basis so that we can escalate urgent cases directly to the Cabinet Office to pursue with Capita, and providing personal support to members wherever we can. We treat each member with the same level of importance in trying to get their pension issue resolved. But in the first instance, you should register a complaint through the pension portal, which should now be operating fully on the official website, and the online chat form. You no longer need to register for an online account to submit a form, and it should now have the Track My Case function, which was added recently as part of the upgrade of the portal. This will be a quicker way to register your complaint. But when the portal was not working in January, why couldn't they put a message on to let people know it wasn't working properly and there were some functionality issues? That would have saved a lot of frustration and managed expectations in a better way. There is a formal complaints process after you've done this initial complaint through the portal, known as the internal dispute resolution process. Now, this is something that all pension schemes have to have. It's got 2 stages. Stage 1 is an appeal to the administrator, which is Capita. So that's the first stage of a formal appeal. And then if you remain dissatisfied with the determination decision, then you can appeal to stage 2, and that appeal goes to the Cabinet Office for a determination. However, I would caution against rushing straight into that, believing that will escalate your case, because this is a lengthy process. It can take up to 18 months to complete with a final determination decision if you go through both stages of that. And clearly, people haven't got time to wait for all that to try and resolve their pension issues. A number of members came to us and said, well, we want to go to the pension ombudsman. The independent pension ombudsman will not normally investigate a complaint until you've been through both stages of the internal dispute resolution process. And even then, and this will shock you, it can take over 4 years before the complaint is investigated by the Ombudsman's office, due to the sheer volume of casework that they're dealing with. Now, if you want to hear more about how the Ombudsman's office works, you can go on their website, pensions-ombudsman.org.uk. But all of this, and I know this from a stakeholder meeting I had with the Pensions Ombudsman last year, they have such a huge volume of cases, they're not able to deal with them, and they won't even look at a case unless it's been through the initial stages of the internal dispute resolution process. Now, if we move on then to what you do then if you're in immediate hardship. If you've retired in the past 12 months, there is transition support available through your departments. And the amounts of money available are from £5,000 up to £10,000, depending on the circumstances. Now, originally, they were called hardship loans, and we and the Cabinet Office make clear this is not a hardship loan, this is an advance of what you're owed. And there are, so far, there's been 769 transition payment loans have been paid to members who retired within the last 12 months, worth around £4 million across 58 employing departments. Now, if you have retired or plan to retire within and you're still within the department or been within the department within the last 12 months, then you should apply to your employer to get the transition loan to help you through, and then you pay back once you've got all of your pension payments. If you're a deferred member that you left the civil service, you're now trying to contact Capita to get your pension and payment, you can apply for a hardship loan through Capita. Now, we know now there are around 1,246 deferred members waiting for their pensions. 371 of those have still not received their lump sum payments. But they should be available through Capita. But I'm aware from some of the cases I'm dealing with that the Capita have not been very forthcoming so far in paying many of the loans. But if that is the case, we need to know about it because we can help to escalate cases. But if you contact CSPA or your union to help escalate urgent hardship cases, Capita have said that they are triaging hardship cases and fast tracking where there's if people contact them with specific hardship needs, and that is an option that you've got. And moving on now to a question that we've been asked quite a lot about how do you seek compensation for all of this? There's been a huge amount of stress and problems for people. And the issues to consider in seeking compensation, first of all, the priority is to get your pension right in the first place before you consider compensation. And that's why we've been focused on trying to get the pensions in payment rather than concentrating on what we do for compensation. Depending on the cases, redress may include interest on the arrears or delayed payments. Well, we know now we've got a process in place for interest to be added to the arrears to be paid. Compensation for distress and inconvenience, and reimbursement for proven financial loss. Now, I've got to say that awards for compensation in most pension schemes tend to be modest, usually around £500, unless there's clear evidence of financial harm or prolonged maladministration in the payment of the pension. Now, to do this, and we've checked in terms of legal advice that's been published elsewhere and other information sources, you need to determine what are your losses, what evidence can you show for your losses, and that would be, for example, bank charges, penalties for missed payments, for payments that you should have been expecting, and so on. So there are ways of pursuing a compensation claim, but the immediate priority, and I think what most of you would be focused on now, is how do you get your pension in payment? And that's the thing that we're trying to ensure is much clearer. But in order to make a compensation claim, you should keep all your documents, emails, letters, pension quotes, screenshots, call notes, and evidence of the losses that you've incurred. And that can also be part of your, if you do a formal complaints in the IDRP process, the internal dispute resolution process. And you can prepare a simple timeline, send it by email or letter to the contact centre at Capita. You can use the portal, which is the civilservicepensionscheme.org.uk, if you're able to log in. But if you can't and you need to write a letter, then you write to the Capita Pension Solutions at their PO Box 713 Darlington, DL19JZ. We'll send out the slides later, and that's got the address within that. But you need to be clear if you're claiming compensation. Be clear about what you want: the correct pension position sorted, specific payments, arrears, explanation, and the amount of the compensation that you're seeking. The formal complaints route is available if all informal resolution fails, you're not happy with the responses you receive from Capita. Now, if we can move on now to the next slide. And CSPA has been providing briefings to the Public Accounts Committee, on some of our priority individual cases, which were highlighted in the recent televised questioning of Capita in late March. So if you could just click on the video for this, a very short video clip. Is that playing? Jane, I don't know whether we can click the video. I don't know if people can hear that. Is that possible to click on that video?
I'm sorry, David. I'm not sure the sound has been enabled because I wasn't aware the video was there. But
Yeah, sorry about. Okay,
I apologise.
it was just that they did reference the cases that we had triaged up to the Public Accounts Committee, and that was mentioned in that clip. We were just going to briefly show you. But many members have contacted their MP directly about the cases where they were getting no response from Capita. That parliamentary pressure has proved effective in highlighting the chaos of administration and securing a parliamentary debate in early February, getting very urgent cases addressed quickly. And we've been playing our part in that with briefings with MPs, briefings with senior members of the Public Accounts Committee to highlight the lived experiences of so many of our members. And I can report that since that last Public Accounts Committee hearing on the 26th of March, where the two senior Capita managers were there, it was a quick progress has been made in the cases that we'd put forward, which were very high urgent priority cases that we had triaged, and it was useful to have highlighted that to show the lived experiences of some of our members. If you haven't seen that whole inquiry debate, it is available online. If you go online to the Public Accounts Committee website, and you'll see on the parliamentary website, and you can watch that clip from the 26th of March. But it does make interesting reading, and it is a good example of the importance of accountability. When these public contracts are made for people to run pension schemes and people are directly affected, it is important that there is external scrutiny and accountability for when it goes wrong. So if we just move on to the next case, so the next slide, and some of the issues that we've been dealing with. Sorry, the typing is a bit small on this one, but it gives an example of some of the cases. We've been triaging our casework on a weekly basis to escalate with the Cabinet Office, supporting members daily by being a helpful ear and providing personal support wherever able. We treat each case with the same level of importance as the last, but we are limited on the scope of our resources, but we've got Katrina and myself in the office there to help on these pension cases. We've had one recently retired prison officer who I was in contact with again this morning. He left the service in November 2025, expecting his lump sum payment to be made, and that was expected by the end of November. And his first monthly pension payment at the end of December. He retired in November. Instead, he spent Christmas and much of January with no income, despite repeated attempts to contact Capita. He was forced to borrow money from family and friends before finally receiving his lump sum in February. His monthly payments are still pending at this time. And I checked in with him this morning, and he had expected the pensions to be paid by now because it was 8 weeks since he got the lump sum, but that still hasn't been paid, which I'm very disappointed about. But we are assured by the Cabinet Office that in those cases, all of those pre-December payments should be paid by no later than the end of April. In another case, we had the widow of a retired civil servant. The civil servant had died in September 2025. She'd been waiting months for a widow's pension to begin, and despite submitting all the required documentation, she'd been told back in October that in October she was told the pension would be in payment by the end of November, and of course that was just before the transition. It got caught up in the backlog, but that delay has left her without any source of income. Her husband had died in September, no income there, and no widow's pension, causing significant distress and leaving her to be hospitalised. We've been liaising with her family about that. It was a case as well that we'd highlighted with MPs and took up with the Cabinet Office, and I'm pleased to say that one has been resolved. But you've got a lot of civil servants who are working who had retirement plans. They wanted to go in April, which is a normal time for a lot of people to retire at the end of the financial year and just before the start of the spring and summer. And one member I was talking to some months ago is saying his complete retirement plan has been disrupted. An MOD civil servant, he eventually had to withdraw his resignation in January and continue working because of the failure to get any information as to whether his pension would be in payments, but when it was needed at the end of March. And now there's so many stories like that where people have had their whole retirement plans totally disrupted. The pension payment was needed to finalise his retirement. that clearly is caught up with this whole backlog of quotations and finalisation statements that have not been made. But even long-standing pensioners have been affected by this backlog. We had one case of a 90-year-old pensioner, so he'd been drawing his civil service pension for 30 years. He had his payments suspended for 4 months while there was a routine proof of existence form sent to him, which is a regular thing just to check that the person's still alive. He returned the form in plenty of time, registered post. It got stuck in the backlog. And so without any warning, they just suspended his pension in September, then sent out the form for the proof of existence. And then he was left with actually no income at all, despite having had a regular pension payment for the last 30 years. We took that one up with the Cabinet Office, and again, that was sorted out quite quickly and arrears were paid. Now, I highlight those just as examples. There's a lot more, thousands more of cases, and I'm sure many of you are going through this same problem, and it's just not acceptable. Now, moving on to the next slide, we have been triaging cases, and we have had some good feedback from that, from the members who've tried to help. We've been supporting members, trying to be helpful here. Katrina is in the office most of the time, has been helping talk to members, triaging the cases so that we can give priority to the ones where there's immediate and urgent hardship. And I really thank Katrina for all the work she's done, and it's been appreciated by our members for that. So finally, before we get onto questions, we move on to the next slide. That's just to say, we as CSPA, we've been in existence for 74 years now. We are there for retired civil servants, but we're also there for anyone who's got a civil service pension. And now our strapline is protecting what you've earned. We are there to protect what you've earned as in your career, and that's why we've been so closely involved in all these different pension cases that we've got now. But I just want to conclude with that, and now we can move on to questions that you will have. Do you want to move on to questions, Jane?
Yeah, thanks, David. That was hopefully that's really useful. Gave some really good background, and it is really quite shocking at how many people this is affecting. We do have lots of questions, so we will try and get through as many as we can. But as we said, any that we can't address, we will try to put in a PDF document, which will be attached to the recording of this video. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with the same statements for 20 that might appear. So one is that was any ideas on when pension saving statements for 2024 or 24-25 might appear, and what the consequences will be in terms of tax owed, and whether there is any compensation arrangements for that, or anything that person needs to do to prepare for it.
I haven't got hard information on these statements. We know about the annual benefit statements going out, but in terms of the tax implications, we haven't got clear visibility of when that will be done. But for any issue where there is a tax consequence of that, then the first thing to do is contact HMRC to explain the situation. We know from a lot of the cases we've been dealing with that when people contact the HMRC, they've got a team now that dealing with civil service pension issues, because there are so many of them now where people have been caught up with delay payments in coming into a different tax year, and all the various tax implications. Where there is a clear problem with the delayed payments, and then that has tax implications, then that's something you should discuss with HMRC to see how that can be rectified. But also, if there is a loss arising from that, that could be something that should be part of a formal complaint and a claim for compensation.
Okay, thanks, David. The second one is as much of a comment as a question, which is, when will telephone call handlers be any more use than a chocolate fire guard? Yeah. But I'm not sure you're in a position to answer that. But
I mean, what I will say, I think the people they employ, clearly that that they're trying to do what they can do to try and help the situation, and it's certainly not their fault, the whole problem of the administration. These people have taken a lot of abuse, understandably, because people have got frustrated with not being able to get clear answers. And I think this comes back to the core problem of Capita not getting their communication strategy right in the first place. When things had gone wrong, and it became very apparent they'd gone wrong within the first week of the switchover, they should have been putting more information onto the website to let people know that there were problems, and how and what the expected waiting times could be to address them. But it didn't help when people were encouraged to log onto the portal. We weren't aware that there's 122,000 would not be able to log on anyway. But then there were others who had tried to log on, they'd failed, and then they got locked out. And it took some weeks before we got about 12,000 people back onto the website, where they had to readjust the back of the website to readmit them again. And then when people did manage to get through the portal, put in a query, told to get a response within 10 days, and nothing materialized. I think, again, it's if there are going to be those people can be let down, and it would be better to have put an explanation on there to explain the problems with the portal, explain the problems of the delay, and what the scheduling time is for dealing with different categories of retirement. It took the surge team led by Angela McDonald, the second permanent secretary at HMRC. It took her surge team working with the senior Capita people a few weeks. Sorry, I've got a dry throat. A few weeks to get that sorted, and there should have been that clarity much earlier.
Okay, you okay there, David?
Sorry, just taking some water.
Okay, but no, and clearly communication has been poor, as well as the issues that they faced. The communication of those issues has been poor as well. Another question is, both myself and my husband are looking to retire in December 2026, and our paperwork needs to be completed June, July this year. Do you think that Capita will be up to date by then, and will we be able to retire as planned?
Yes, on that case, I would be quite confident saying yes, based on what we know of the recovery plan and the clear commitments that have now been made. And the Cabinet Office and Capita are saying that there will be business as normal by the end of June, that should be, everything will be sorted out and on a normal rolling basis by then. And then it's a question of getting the paperwork in, and then they do allow time. You get your quotes, you then have to respond to whether you're accepting the quote. It leads to a finalisation statement, but they do allow a period of time for each of those steps for you to make your decision. And obviously, the quicker you respond to it, the more it can be, the quicker it can be put in process. The normal guideline in the previous My CSP arrangement, which will probably carry over, is that it would take 4 months from putting in for the application for retirement for a certain date. 4 months before you retire, you put in that application, and that should be processed. But of course, where it's gone wrong is people did just that in September, October, November time, putting in requests to retire at the end of February or the end of March, and then it then got caught up with all of this backlog. But it should be, we're more confident now that it should be business as normal from the end of June.
Let's very much hope so, because there's another person saying, hello, I've applied for my pension. I applied for my pension almost a year ago. Is it likely to be resolved soon? I mean, I suppose they are taking steps to try to resolve this backlog.
So what was the pension date for that?
They said almost a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be in payment now, because they certainly, we're aware of the delay on some of the deferred members, but even then, most of those lumps, we know now that was about 1,200 cases, and of which there's only about 300 outstanding to receive the lump sum payments. But by now, the ones that were with certainly that far away should have been resolved by now.
So would that perhaps be to encourage to chase if possible, because that doesn't sound right that it's not resolved, or
yes,
does it? Yeah.
People can contact if they go on the CSPA website and just click on join us. You can then get through, and then we can talk to Katrina, and we can see what we can do to help.
Okay. Next one is I am impacted by remedy immediate choice. However, I've never received any communication on this, and we should have since received communication on this by October 2025. Sorry, I apologise. I don't know what remedy immediate choice is. Are you aware of that, David?
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Good.
I was just looking because we have had an update on that on the which I did have on a slide. Sorry, one sec. So just give me a sec at the very end there. Yeah. Oh. Bear in mind, sorry. We had. I've just got to make sure I get the figures right. Yes, I've got this now. Okay. Yeah. So this is the McLeod remedy. For those who haven't been following this closely, and it does get very technical, but basically it was there was the new, when we moved to Alpha in 2015, people were allowed to have transitional arrangements where they could stay in the classic pension scheme. That was then challenged on grounds of that was unfair on age discrimination grounds. And there was a McLeod judgment in 2018 that led to a remedy whereby any service between April 2015 and April 2022 for people who'd been in service, who'd been in post and reckonable service during that period and had been in post prior to that, that would then be covered by the remedy, where they would have a choice between either Alpha or Classic benefits for that period of time of the remedy period. The reason it's defined like that is because Alpha started in April 2015, and then everyone was switched over to Alpha by April 2022. That's why it defines that 7-year period. What we know is there were 74,000 people who'd already retired who were in scope for the remedy. In addition, there were 21,000 deferred members who were covered by the remedy. In October 2025, because of the build-up of backlog that was happening, the Cabinet Office suspended work in issuing the immediate choice forms. So for those who've already retired, they're giving an immediate choice. So they've got 12 months to make that immediate choice, but they're given the choice then. And the idea was that would all be completed well before this transition. And of course it wasn't. So what happened was the work was suspended, and over half of those affected are still waiting for their immediate choice forms. So the work was put on hold, and it meant like people like the person who just asked the question have not received their immediate choice form. They're now working on a plan of how this could be sorted out, and they're talking about a plan to get all of this sorted out by 2027 or during in 2027. But trying to get, because they're trying to deal with this, the rest of the backlog, then come back to that. I would say this doesn't affect anyone who's currently still working and got retirement plans. They will get their deferred choice underpin option. They'll get their choice benefits at the point at which they retire. Right. So that's all the business as normal. That's carrying on as normal. There are also a backlog of 400 cases for members who returned their immediate choice forms. So they said, right, they opted, for example, for Alpha, they wanted a particular payment from that, but they were not implemented due to the complexity of their particular pension arrangements. So there's still a backlog to be worked through. Capita apparently are now working on a plan with the Cabinet Office of processing this work in progress. And the scope of this work is all due to be completed by during 2027. Right. So I'm afraid it is a longer wait now before they will get their immediate choice form. But of course, any payments will be backdated with appropriate interest where necessary.
Okay. Another person says it's bad enough that so many have not been paid, but there are also people like myself that had to withdraw my application and reapply. Although I am still being paid my usual wage, I had committed to purchases and other things, expecting my lump sum. And this had great financial implications as I could not get refunds as I didn't go ahead with partial retirement. what support is open to them if you've not actually, yeah, I suppose you've withdrawn it because of the issues. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this
Um,
could well be a case of making a formal complaint and seeking compensation for losses if you can show losses, but it will not be considered for a transition payment if the person is still working and hasn't actually retired yet and hasn't got that in payment. But we've had worse cases of people who had put in for their retirement, say from the end. One of the cases I've been dealing with, looking at, who was retiring at the end of April, had plans for that retirement, had made financial commitments to a builder based on the expectation of getting their lump sum ready by then, only to be found out that at the earliest will be the end of June before they're sorted out. Now, clearly, that causes huge problems, but obviously, the Capita will not take responsibility for financial commitments that people make on the basis of expecting the lump sum. But nevertheless, it's showing the disruption this has on people's lives. And people make plans, and they make plans where married couples will make plans with the basis with their partners to on what they're going to do and when they're going to retire, and then it gets thrown into disarray because of all this backlog. It's not what they're making.
And again, somebody else asking that they want to inquire about partial retirement, and I'm assuming that just when will that be available? Are they able to inquire now, or is that going to get caught up in the
people can still put in applications for partial retirement, and then but I would say that obviously that process takes a few months anyway with the department, and all that you have to arrange with the department on that, then getting the pension and payment. But because we're now expecting business as normal by the end of June, it should mean that you can start to think about putting in requests, but just bearing in mind that there is a backlog being cleared at the moment.
We're technically at the end, David, but if you're happy to continue for 10 minutes, so unless you have to,
that's fine.
would you be happy? I think if we go for another 10 minutes till 12 o'clock, but then we may well have to collate the rest of the questions and put the answers online. There was somebody saying, I finally received my quote last week after putting it in last July, but the amounts are thousands lower than what my CSP modeler showed them in November, using the same retirement date. They flagged this with Capita, but they can't get a response. Again, I suppose it's where do people go if they think there's errors or they think there's, they're trying to move things forward. The best way to escalate, I suppose, isn't it, and get the answers.
The only way to do that is through the portal, but it will be a delay before they deal with all the backlog of cases, because what they're trying to do is get, obviously it's a rolling program all the time. People are putting in retirement applications as usual every day, so it's trying to get the backlog sorted and keep pedaling to get the new cases brought on. So it's but where we've had a number of cases like this where the quote's not when they get the quote's different to what they'd expected from the original calculation, and I think again it's just trying to get a breakdown of how it's been arrived at and getting an understanding of that, but you can only do that through Capita.
And I suppose you're just wanting to double check that it's correct given all the other issues that are going on. Somebody else says, I'll be 60 in the next couple of months and plan to retire either fully or partially. When will the calculators be available on the new portal?
I was led
at
to
least
believe
under the old system, they could move the sliders and work out roughly what the impact of the decision would be.
I haven't checked in the last few days, but I was led to believe that the calculators were now available on the portal, because all the upgrades to the portal were to be implemented by the end of March. But I am aware that the portal was down over the Easter weekend because of this data breach that I referred to earlier.
So it might be worth just logging on again and seeing if they're there. Okay.
And for people who may have logged on in January and couldn't get through and then have given up trying to log on, try again to log on, because there should be a lot more functionality now.
Okay, somebody has actually just said no, they're not available. They checked yesterday, so
Right.
yeah,
We,
yeah.
we
So
can
that sounds like there might
as it
still be
happens,
issues.
we've got a meeting with the Cabinet Office this afternoon. We have a regular weekly meeting with them now to get updates on this. So that's a point we can raise with them about
Yeah,
the calculators that need to be there. People need to be able to do their planning for
yeah,
retirement.
yeah, yeah. So that might well be worth raising if it's still an issue. It says, why are Capita and the task force celebrating and patting themselves on the back for wins, like answering calls within so many minutes, when the time taken to answer, calls makes no difference? Yeah, I suppose what people want is yeah, action rather than
Yeah,
their
I
call
fully
answered.
sympathise with that because
Yeah,
we know that from what the calls we've had, that people just wait for hours, and even when they get through quickly, they're told it's been escalated, but there's no clarity of who it's been escalated to. Now it's interesting because we raised that with the MPs and the Public Accounts Committee, and in briefings we gave them, they questioned Capita about this, and Capita assured everyone that there is an escalation process, which I'm sure there is, but there's not much clarity of how it works and the timescales. And again, this comes down to communication to try and manage people's expectation of when they
yeah,
might expect to receive something. But it really has been poor there. And I agree that it's that Capita have concentrate now on the call times being done in 20 responses within 20 seconds or whatever. But that's no good if you still can't get your query answered.
yeah, yeah.
So, and again, I would say
Um,
this is not the fault of the staff. You know, they're trying to do the best that they can. They turn up for work, try and do a good job, but they're going to deal with the systems and the information they've got before them. And
yeah,
I think that's
yeah. I mean,
where things need to
it's a
improve.
mammoth task. Yeah, yeah. Somebody else has said, is it true that Capita have now also been awarded the civil service payroll contract, given issues with data breaches, etc.? Again,
Yeah,
don't
they
really feel
have.
answering, or yeah,
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 they have.
they have.
But it's not an issue that we directly get involved with. But I know the PCS union have been putting a lot of issues around that and have been quite prolific in social media about that decision. There's also been articles in the civil service world, if people read that as well about
Yeah,
that. But that
yeah,
does seem to be the case. They have been awarded that contract. Yeah.
yeah. Again, there was another question about the portal and when will it be stable to allow people looking to retire to access their details. It does sound like there are still issues with the portal, which again might be worth flagging
Yeah.
if they're not aware of, or if the Cabinet Office aren't aware of them. Somebody else says the topic was a feature on BBC The One show late January, February.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously it's been a huge issue for thousands of people. So, and the longer it goes on, I suppose the more publicity it will attract. Somebody said, "What is the situation in respect of those members who were ill health retired, and because they are more complicated, they haven't received the figures under the McLeod remedy?" This person retired in October 2020 and has just been told it's a more complicated case, and they're concerned, as there isn't a finite date for this all to be sorted. Yeah,
Right. If there are issues like that, and we've had some like that where the person has retired and they've now got serious ill health issues, then that is one that we could see what can be done to try and speed up a decision on
yeah,
that. But I have to say, from the readout that we got about the implementation of McLeod, things have been delayed. What that because and I have to say, part of this is the build up to the contract. They had not programmed Capita to be doing the remedy work other than the ongoing remedy work. They hadn't been contracted to do that because it
right,
was expected to have been finished for those who'd retired. And because it wasn't, they now have to work on a plan to see when that could be done. But it all was put on hold. But I think if there are real issues affecting because of ill health, that would be worth highlighting through the portal to highlight that is that they need to know when that can be determined.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
can't obviously I can't speak for Capita or the Cabinet Office on this, but we're just trying to understand best how things like this will be dealt with for the remedy.
And like you say, I think one of the main things is when they're not being clearly the timelines and stuff aren't being communicated, so it just leaves people hanging, not knowing when things might be resolved for them. And there's another person who retired 6th of April, and they put their paperwork through in September 25 and have had nothing from Capita, so they're now retired without pension or lump sum. So again, they've been calling to try and escalate it. Again, it's a question of when they're likely to hear, I suppose. Is this
well,
June?
That's going to be caught up with what I quoted earlier. This is Angela McDonald's update from the 26th of March, which is available to read on the official website. And what she said is Capita is currently focused on the quotes they inherited from ICSP, some 9,000 quotes. Urgent cases are coming through Escalation. Only very limited work is being done on quotes submitted to Capita since 1st December 2025. Therefore, realistically, it will be some weeks before quotes requested from the last 3 months will be actioned. Now, that's for the quotes, but for if the person has had finalisation statements, then we would expect that the pension should be paid by the end of June. But clearly, that's not going to help the person if they're expecting to be able to retire in April.
Again, I mean, a lot of people are saying it's very worrying that Capita have been named as the payroll provider. Again, a lot of people obviously concerned they want some indication of when they can expect annual statements, when retirement model will be available. I assume CISPA are simply, like you say, you're having regular meetings with the Cabinet Office. You are able to raise issues with them as they come up. I'm just conscious of time. We have had lots and lots of questions, and I think what we are going to have to do is we'll sift through them and put some, even if it's kind of general answers out, which tries to address most of them. In terms of just kind of summing up, in terms of people who are they've not been able to get their lump sum, not got their retirement pension. As you've said, if they still have a connection to the department, if they've not yet retired or they've recently left, they have the option of applying to their department for a loan to bridge until their pension is sorted, and also the hardship loans. And also that CISPA can take up cases if they need to be escalated and they're kind of on. Do you take up any case, or is it that there has to be kind of a ill health or a particular
we have to
strand
look at it? We can give some general advice about or general information rather, about what we know is the timescale for completing particular tranches of work, and that's based on our discussions with the Cabinet Office and understanding what's coming out from the recovery team of their plan to get back to an even keel. So we can't take up every single case, but what we can try and do is give some information and direction about what can be done. And where we're aware of a very serious case, then we do triage that and take it up directly. But with the questions that are coming up here, then these are ones where we can take out the ones that we can't answer specifically, but we need to know and take that up with Cabinet Office for them to give us some clarity.
That would be brilliant. So just to finish off, so we will look at all the questions and we will attempt to get answers, or as you said, at least raise those issues higher up. Just to finish off in terms of the charity, as I said earlier, the charity does accept applications from people, including applications for financial assistance. Now, whilst we can't replace the loans that are offered by your departments, we can look at applications on a case-by-case basis. We can consider sort of some short-term financial assistance if people are in real hardship, and if this is causing you stress, anxiety, as I say, you might want to speak to a member of our wellbeing team, or go onto our website to download the Thrive app, which has got lots of information in terms of managing stress and mental health issues if that's causing that. And even if you just need some advice from a money advisor in terms of managing in the short term until your pension is resolved, then certainly it's worth making an application to speak to a money advisor. applications can be made through our website. It's through a portal. It might help just to put Capita somewhere on the application, just so we can monitor how many applications are coming through, and that is part of the issue. So I would just like to thank David very much for that presentation, and I do hope it's given people some at least background information and some idea of what the current situation is, and how you can start to perhaps escalate things and get things resolved.
And I think you are going to circulate the slides, aren't you, as well?
Yes, yeah. The slides and the recording of this webinar will be available on our website as well. So thank you, everybody. I just wanted to introduce
Katrina. Katrina, who is the voice that many people will have spoken to at the CSPA office. She's been very good in helping to triage cases and is familiar with all the issues that we've got with the Cabinet Office. So thanks to Katrina as well for all her help.
So so thank you very much for joining, and we'll now say goodbye. But thank you.
Thank you.